Welcome to the New Agility podcast. I'm Haran and I'm here with Chris Davis. Today we're going to be talking about Shu-Ha-Ri. Some people may not have heard about that word, but we have a question about using Shu-Ha-Ri to learn Agile. So it's a colleague of ours was asked if Shu-Ha-Ri is how do you learn Agile, and Shu-Ha-Ri was the approach that was advocated. But the question is it actually true? We kind of accept it at face value, perhaps. So, Chris, I'm going to ask you, just for the benefit of those who may not have heard of Shu-Ha-Ri, could you first give us a little summary of what it means?
Yeah, certainly. Thanks, Haran. I first heard about the concept Shu-Ha-Ri as three separate stages of learning. It originated, as far as I was concerned, through Alistair Cockburn, the signatory to the Agile Manifesto, inventor of crystal methods. He advocated this as a way of learning, a path to learning and mastery. Essentially, it comes from Japanese martial arts, and before that, even theatre. But it's a concept that says, and it's very Japanese in concept. The idea is that at the Shu stage, when you're starting to learn something, imagine you're trying to learn karate or jiu-jitsu or something, and you are taught to strictly follow the established techniques, the rules, the guidelines, move like this, stand like that, have your weight on your front foot, your hands should be like this, etc., right? And there are very good reasons why you do it in that very particular fashion, but you're not taught why. You're taught these are the rules. This is how you need to do it. When you get to the second stage, you become proficient in obeying the rules. You know what the rules are, and you're proficient at following them. You then are taught how to experiment and to adapt things. What happens when you change this? What happens when you change that? How does that affect things? And you learn how to adapt and evolve a bit. And then when you've got through that, you get to a stage of Ri, which is a bit more mastery in nature, and you transcend rules. You get to allowing learners to create your own methods and techniques and sequences of movements, if you like, internalizing the essence of the method rather than just rigidly following a set of rules. Okay. Why this came to my mind when, as you said, this colleague of us was talking about, this is how I do it. Going back to another ex-colleague of mine, it really stuck in my head when we were talking about training courses. And he said, very boastfully and egotistically, he always gets 5-star ratings for his courses. And he said, because he never tells people why they should do things a certain way. He just says, do it like this, here's the rules, follow the rules. And he's very clear, repeats them, tells them in different ways, but this is the rules, these are how you need to follow. In a certain context, you can imagine people saying, oh, right, okay, I'll just do that then. Thanks very much. I don't have to think too much. Tick box, I'll just do that. And I'll trust you that everything's going to be great. But it didn't land with me in the way I think it was intended. Because, and I've been kind of thinking about it intermittently ever since, but recently what really struck me was the way that, is there a limit or a distinction between the things that Shu-Ha-Ri is very good for, things like learning martial art techniques? How is that adaptable? How does it apply to everything? Should we learn everything that way? Or are there things that it doesn't really apply?
That's a good question. So just to summarize then, Shu is really like the learner stage where you're following kind of received wisdom. We're basically looking to people who have already mastered whatever skill or technique or art that it might be.
Yes.
And then once you have learnt, you then move on to not just rigidly following the rules, kind of finding exceptions to the rule, let's say. And then the next stage is like the mastery stage. The Ri stage is mastery. And so I suppose there's a few assumptions in there about what you're dealing with. So, perhaps it works really well for martial arts. Does that mean it should work for Agile? I wonder why. Or why not. They should be analogous in the sense. So with Shu, what are the assumptions with Shu? Do you think what needs to be in place for Shu to be relevant?
This is a great question. We're getting to the essence, I think, of why we're discussing this particular topic. And I think it's the built-in assumption, I think, is that there is a master and there's a learner. The master knows virtually everything, and the learner knows nothing. And the biggest assumption, I think, inherent in all of this is that there is only one right way. Right. So, for example, my experience with martial arts is very limited. I spent about a year doing Chinese martial arts many years ago, and I stopped because of an injury. But there is this idea that there is only one right. Whether you're taught in London or Hong Kong or Tokyo, there's one right way to do this particular style, and that's the way you do it. Right? Only a master can create a new style or evolve different styles. But if you're learning this style, that's what you're going to do. This is what I'm teaching you. Okay. Where I think this has translated to Agile, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself here, but the idea is that if you're learning Scrum at Scale instead of SAFe or something, whatever style method you're using, you have to follow the rules. So there is a similarity in that sense. But if that's your framework, those are the rules, and that's what you have to learn. You have to learn all the rules first, so that you can then figure out how to break them, how to evolve and adapt. Right. So I think that's where the initial.
There's also something else there. So if you think of martial arts and you go to learn karate and you see a master, you automatically revere that master, right? You look at them and think, this master knows what they're doing, right? They've got a black belt or whatever. They're probably old. They've been doing it all their life. They know what they're talking about, and there's a reverence and a complete trust in that way. I think if any martial arts environment, there's that deference to the sensei, isn't it? The master.
Absolutely.
Now, as an Agile coach, I don't know if that is relevant, right? I mean, if you're doing let's say an Agile transformation and you come in with a team, the first thing you're getting is not reverence. So,
and there's a reason for that.
So go on. What is the reason?
Well, and this I think is again, it's about is Shu-Ha-Ri actually applicable? Because when as I say, there's one right way to do something. Shu-Ha-Ri works. It's fine. When you are trying to apply Agile methods, you're trying to implement it within an area of complexity. We have an organization where what they are doing is different from one organization to another. Even you can broadly categorize it as, we're doing software development. Yeah, but this organization is product focused. This organization runs projects. This one has are building social media stuff. This one is building applications for investment banking, right? The work that they do is different. The team sizes are different. The criticality of the work they do is different. The corporate structure, the team structure is different. So what we're questioning here is there one right way of implementing Agile, inverted commas, that is applicable to all of the teams in all of the organizations?
Yeah.
No, there can't be. I mean, otherwise there would only be one Agile method in the world.
Yes, and I suppose Well, I suppose a pushback on that would be, well, there are different types of martial arts. But anyway, let's not go there. But I suppose a closer analogy might be that you are going into a team who already have a combat style, and that you're telling them, oh no, we've got another combat style. So so forget everything, ignore everything that you know, ignore all your instincts, etc., and just follow my new martial art. Which is a slightly different thing, and I can imagine that it would be if you're Shu-Ha-Ri in the martial arts approach, you're basically the pattern I can see is that you're starting with complete beginners who know nothing, right? But we're always working with people who know stuff. They've been, if it's software development, they've been developing software for years. They've got pain. They've been through different phases. Technologies have changed. Context has changed. Politics affect things. So it's much more context specific. And I also wonder, it may be a cultural thing as well. I mean, I know. I think you said it didn't sit right with you. I think you said that just to be told to do something without knowing why, and I think that happens a lot, right? So I like to understand the why of something when I'm learning.
Absolutely, yeah. A couple of things popped to mind when you were talking there. Is that your understanding the why, I think, is a really important thing, and this is why my argument here is Shu-Ha-Ri does not belong with Agile. We're teaching people how to be Agile. And one of the things that coincidentally I noticed when I was reading in a LinkedIn article by Al Shalloway, who's one of the guys who I respect enormously for what he writes and says. In a particular LinkedIn post, he says a major weakness of Agile methods is they tell us what to do.
Right.
And they so often don't tell you why, right? And he goes on to understand a little bit later. I'm reading off another window I've got on my machine here. It says, there is a huge amount of evidence that without theory, people learn much more slowly and even resist adopting what are good practices. Telling people to follow until they understand is demeaning, disrespectful, and a poor way to lead. Like, I read that.
So that's the opposite of Shu-Ha-Ri, really, isn't it? A totally different philosophy, right?
Yeah, it is. So when you think about this, and you come back to exactly what you were saying a minute ago, we Agilists often come in as the expert, right? We are here to teach you our style of karate, and we're a master at this, and we're going to teach you that. What I think a lot of us are missing is that we're going into an environment we don't understand.
Yeah, I never go in feeling like I'm the expert, I have to say. And when a coach that does, they stand out like a sore thumb, don't they? It's like you're thinking, oh God, you're coming in here lecturing like you know it all. It doesn't work.
Well, I say the word expert because some of more than one of my clients has called me the expert. And
there's sometimes that conception as well.
But my pushback on that is, I don't think of myself as the expert. I think of us as experts in our different fields. I'm an expert, perhaps, but so are you. We have our different things, areas of expertise, right?
Yes.
I know nothing about about your environment, your structure, your culture, what it is you're doing, your tools, your methods, right? So we come from two different areas of expertise.
Yes.
Trying to create a partnership that we can make things better.
Yeah, and I think that's the key point, right? So the solution must be co-created. Correct. It must, in a sense, be new because it's a unique combination of the team or whoever you're working with and you as a coach. It will be co-created. The solution will emerge from the wisdom of the two people.
Correct. I agree. What I also find fascinating is that you used the word solution there. I'm glad you did, because to implement a solution implies you've got a problem you're trying to solve,
Yes.
or at least an objective you're trying to reach. In most of the agile transformations I've been involved with, there is no objective except implement that, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying there wasn't an objective. There may well have been at some point. I know at least one organization that had a list of, here's why we're doing this, here's why the transformation matters, we're trying to achieve these targets. That got forgotten very, very quickly.
Yeah, so there's often a big kind of why at the top of the company, which almost gets lost. It kind of boils down to, okay, what are the things we've got to do? What are the structures we've got to do? I think maybe that is the nub of the problem. The Shu-Ha-Ri approach maybe encourages an obsession with the framework.
Yes.
And not really any of the deeper stuff.
No, I exactly that. I think it's a shortcut. It's psychological as well, because when faced with problems, the human brain is very good at jumping to conclusions. At very quickly going, oh, I can see this, therefore I think we need to do that. So when presented with something that looks like and looks and sounds like a reasonable solution, we're quite happy to jump on it and say, oh, thank goodness, I'm happy now, I'm comfortable now, I've got a solution, rather than sit for a while in the uncertainty of the complexity of the problem, which is where there's another quote from Einstein, which I'm not going to bother trying to get right. But he talks about, and I'm not even sure if he did actually say it, but something around, if the world was about to end in an hour, I'd spend 50 minutes trying to look at understand the problem.
Right.
Something to that.
Yes.
Area. It's been attributed to Einstein. I'm not sure he actually said it.
Whereas if there was only an hour left, I'd probably just eat donuts or something.
yeah, exactly. Eat donuts. But the philosophy behind this is let's stop jumping to conclusions.
Yes.
Shuhari assumes that there's the one right solution for you, and that's what you need to do. I mean, what I'm saying is that you don't know that. So let's spend a bit more time. Forget the whole martial arts thing. Forget the Shuhari. Let's try to work out not just what works for this team here, but what is it we're trying to accomplish? What does works mean?
Yes.
What are we trying to make better?
Yes.
So many organizations won't tell me this. Just do your job. Just implement the framework. Tell that team how to be agile, because there's this insistence. There's got to be a right way, and every company's got to do it that way, and it's just the right thing to do. And
So let me just push back slightly, because I'm thinking there probably are situations when working with teams where a little bit of Shuhari may work, and what I mean by that is sometimes basically you're going to ask sometimes for the team to trust you enough to try something, to experiment with something. Just try this for this sprint, see how it goes, and then we'll decide at the end. So there's a little bit of just do this and try it, without necessarily being convinced of its veracity.
I think what I think you're talking about is Shuhari in the small rather than the big.
Yes, mini Shuhari.
I can talk about it at the big, and I'll stand by it's wrong.
Yeah.
What you're talking about here is agile in the small, so at an individual practice level, for example.
Yes.
I cannot disagree with that. I think,
and the only reason it works is because you may be granted sufficient trust for something small. You're not going to be granted that level of trust for the whole thing.
That's fair enough. I think that's fair enough. I think what I've been trying to write about is an idea of for transformation and for agile coaching and consulting that basically says, I'm not going to tell you to do anything. I'm going to help you to figure out what to do based on some objectives that we've agreed. So if let's make something up. If we have a team or a team of teams, and their boss has said the problem with this group of teams is they are really not good at meeting requirements, let's say, right? With too many defects, customers aren't happy. We can help them with that. but we need to understand what is contributing to those things. When we work with the team and we see there is, for instance, the business people, the customer reps don't attend any meetings with the team, we can see, okay, there's a disconnect there. That's why we're getting things wrong, because we're making too many assumptions. If that's the problem, what's the solution, right? But if we can help people to understand, here's the problem, what can you do about that, they may come up with their own solutions. If not, then we come into the territory you just mentioned, which is, right, I'm going to suggest something to you, try this.
Yes. It's almost a last resort.
Pretty much a last resort.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, coming back to what we're talking about, there's a pair of experts, two experts with different areas of expertise. I think if given some awareness of what the objective or the problem is, teams are usually smart enough to be able to figure out themselves how to
I mean, I know there are probably some inexperienced teams who need a little more guidance just on sort of quote unquote basic things, but usually that's not the case. And in any case, they still need to feel their way. They need to figuring things out for yourself seems to be quite an important aspect. So let me just come in slightly. So if I think we're in agreement that Shu-Ha-Ri is extremely questionable in the Agile space, right? I'm not quibbling about thousands of years of Japanese tradition, but with and perhaps it kind of caught on because it's kind of cool to do talk about martial arts and Japanese things. But actually, let's get real here. What would you say then? If Shu-Ha-Ri is not really the way, what would you call, or how would you describe the equivalent approach, or the alternative to that? Let's say.
I'm glad you didn't ask me what's the right way.
Well, there's maybe a right philosophy, right? I mean,
I don't think there's people like simple ideas. I don't think it's as simple as that. But fundamentally, what I think is we have to trust people. I think is a good word you used earlier on. Why I think we've been going wrong is a strong word all these years is in trying to make a company or a team's lives better by implementing a framework. There's a lot of good practices, as Al Shalaway talked about. When you give them here's a framework, here's a set of rules, right? Follow those. Especially when some of those things, some of those rules, roles, events clash with the way they've been working, you get resistance to change. You get people talking about Agile doesn't work because of the culture clash. That's another podcast right there about culture. But then they told Richard, well, no, I'm not going to do Agile because you've told me all this rule set, and I have to adopt all of it. But some of it doesn't work for me. Some of them might, but some of it doesn't. So if that's your framework, I'm going to reject it. I don't want to implement this stuff. Whereas if we if we agree with whoever's leading this initiative, whoever their bosses or the management, what is it that Agile is going to do for you, right? If I implement whatever it is, what is that going to give you? What are the objectives? What outcomes do you foresee from that? And we can, ideally, if we can quantify them. So we have measurable outcomes we're trying to get. We're going to improve, let's say we're improve lead time, improving customer satisfaction, whatever it may be. If we've got measurable objectives on that, we can now work to implement practices that are directly targeted at those things from whichever framework they come from.
Yes.
Right? And what I'm saying is ignore frameworks, pay attention to practices from wherever they come, but
to suit the context, to suit the situation.
Yeah, because without that, we're implementing a solution looking for a problem. And we're trying to implement. This is the other thing about consistency. It's a big thing, right? You have to give people the same set of practices, the same rule set across the entire organization, even though we are doing that with teams that are doing fundamentally different things with different structures, different environments, and so on. So it doesn't make sense to me to do that. Whereas if you give all those diverse teams the same objective, you say, right, let's get better at this. Those principles can be interpreted in different ways and into different practices depending on the team we're working with. So if you work with one team and I'm working with another, and we are very, very different teams, we can both tell those teams, I'm here to help. Your boss has said we need to get better at X. How are you guys doing with that? What does that mean to you, right? Are you very good at that or not? If you are very good, tell us what you've been doing so we can teach other teams. If you're not very good at that, great, I'm here to help. What do you need? And then we can say, well, I've got this suggestion, I've got that suggestion, there's another suggestion, here's what might work. Then you get into the, okay, trust me. But it's got to be, I think, based on an objective. We have to be solving a problem or meeting a challenge.
Makes sense. I wonder if there is another Japanese concept which supports that, because if there's a Japanese word, then
I think
we'll be in luck.
That'll be a good one. Fundamentally, what I'm advocating, it's Kaizen. It's small changes.
Yeah.
That will, but it's got to be. Kaizen has to have an objective. It's improving, but what are you improving?
Yeah.
There's got to be something we're aiming towards. Otherwise, it's change for change's sake, and that is just disruptive with no benefit.
Chris, thank you very much. I think that's a really important conversation about Shu-Ha-Ri, which has been kind of taken as a justification for all sorts of bad things. Really enjoyed that conversation. Thank you.
Me too. Thanks, Haran. Nice talking to you again. I guess we'll see each other next week.
Yeah. See you next time. Take care.
See you next time. Take
Bye.
care. Bye for now.